Welcome to the Afflatus, a podcast that brings you career insights from the minds of industry leaders. I'm your host Alok Rathod, and each week I'll be interviewing experts from various fields to uncover their secrets to success. On the show today, we have Melissa Mui, who is a junior photo editor and creative asset manager at Verizon, based in New York City. Originally from Hong Kong but raised in Beijing, Melissa's unique life experiences are a major part of her image-making process. Her work primarily utilizes photography and video to explore identity, belonging, and self-discovery as she navigates through adolescence and adulthood. Melissa graduated from Pearson School of Design in May 2022 with a BFA in photography and a minor in curatorial and museum studies. Welcome to the show, Melissa.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Of course.
Yeah.
Shall we start with a controversial question?
Sure. I read the questions, but I kind of forgot. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ready?
Yes.
Film photography or digital?
That's like the worst question you can ask anyone who's in the photo world, but I want to say film photography just not because that it's trendy right now, but I think it's just more of a craft that it requires more experience to execute it well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like Polaroid photographs?
I don't do it normally. I think that it's fun when you're doing it with friends, but for my own practice, no. No.
Great. So tell me more about your role at Verizon.
You introed the title, which is very broad, junior photo editor / asset manager.
Yep.
It's what does that even mean? And my day-to-day varies a lot, and it kind of goes outside of the description of, what it says in the title. But my primary role is to manage Verizon's digital libraries, where because there's so much asset and imagery that is required from external partners and also our internal channels, it definitely needs some sort of organization and an administrative person to gatekeep some stuff. So that's where I come in, and a lot of other people internally will have to go through me and my team in order to gain access to images for their own use. So that's the very basis of what it is, but of course there's more to talk about.
Yeah. And we'll get into that.
Mm-hmm.
It's so interesting that I first became aware of this role when I was in California and I went to Conan O'Brien's Late Night with Conan shows taping. And one of the tests that they did before actually rolling the cameras is to see, do they have all the digital assets for the animation or images or the news headlines. Sorry, not nude headlines. Those would be some headlines, but
sure.
News headlines that they were trying to joke on. So, the little piece of newspaper that comes in when he's cracking a joke or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that, there's a whole separate team that looks after that. And that's when I became aware of digital assets are a thing. It's it doesn't happen in post. A lot of these shows do it during production where they have a certain setup, but then the host would be looking at a screen and then it would show up. So that's the cue to know that, okay, this piece is done and they can move on to next.
Yeah.
But it's also weird that when I was in investment banking, right, they had this, I used to work with JP Morgan, and they have very strict particular standards for what kind of logo, what kind of font, what kind of color should go into a particular pitch book or a certain, financial document. And there was a centralized repository of all these assets that, okay, for a particular pitch book, you can only use these logos and nothing else. I kind of had an inclination of what you do, but then I just thought that, okay, it would be interesting to have you and probe deeper into that.
Yeah, I think that like you mentioned, these two examples, they're severely different based on the brand or the company or the entertainer. So it's all very fluid, and of course finding the right person for the brand, or like for you to enjoy it, is very, very different. But I think in TV, that's a little bit like more production-wise, like on set. But then like for JP Morgan, that's like a brand, so the requirements and like the demand for those digital assets are definitely going to be different visually, and also I think like brand-wise, like what does that look like? Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of restrictions, but they also are good to kind of train like how you adapt and work within those restrictions. So yeah, every job is different.
What are some of the softwares or tools you use to manage your digital assets?
So there's two specific digital library softwares that we use at Verizon. They're called Brand Central and Media Valet. And so other than those two, I also use like Adobe softwares like Photoshop, InDesign, Lightroom, Bridge, like all of these things that kind of are able to hold on to a large amount of assets. But mainly, like there's a lot of specific workflow that's within Verizon. So like these are very like mainstream within the company. So yeah, those are just like the main two platforms that we use. Mm-hmm.
Do you have to tip the Media Valet?
No. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean, that's not what it means. But yeah.
I would add that feature if I were designing that software.
I know. I think they should pay me to do that in order for, them to get what they need.
Yeah. Great. Okay, cool. What are some of the skills that you think are essential for somebody to succeed in your role, and how did you develop those skills?
Well, I'm still very new to this role. Like I was only hired about like a year ago, like almost getting to the 1 year mark. So I'm still definitely learning a lot, but the main takeaways that I've really, like reflected on is that like someone in this role really needs to be a collaborator, just because our team is, first of all, very small, but also there's a lot of people demanding things, and it's not just, you approving things and then that's it. Yep. It doesn't stop there. And so you have to really be adaptive to everyone's needs and not be, combative in a way that like you think you're better than other people. So I think being really open-minded and flexible and adaptive, like all of these descriptions are kind of what is needed, and I think it's really great for like our generation who are like much younger, and we're able to take in all the knowledge and kind of work with it. So that's like some of the morals or the beliefs that like someone should carry. Another thing is probably to be really proactive. Yeah. I think that normally when you're in a 9-to-5 job, you think that like, oh, I'm just going to do my XYZ things and then just call it a day. But I feel like in this industry, there's always more to do. Like, of course, don't overwork yourself and do more than what you're expected, but there needs to be a push for things to move along in order to meet deadlines and like, get to where it needs to be. So yeah, those are what I took away from my experience.
Yeah, I think that's a great advice, and those skills like, being proactive, being adaptable, being a good team player, those are really important in any job, but more so in media because things are changing so quickly, right? That you need to adjust your approach. Sometimes when you are underway, almost like about to be done with a project, and you might have to do some dramatic shift. So yeah, that's a great advice, and yeah, it's never 9 to 5. I hate to break it to people, but yeah, it's never 9 to 5. So
I mean, like, of course, like it's good if like you have extra skills, like, oh, if you're good at graphic design, if you're good at like photography, like that's always a bonus. But like, of course, don't sell yourself too much. Yeah. Because then people start to take advantage and then make you do more. But to me, I'm like, it's 10 to 6, or sometimes I'm like, it's 9 to 6, and that's it. Yeah,
that's sensible. Yeah, I think that's how everybody should approach that. Can you share an example of a particularly difficult project that you worked on?
I was thinking about this and I was like, do I have any like really challenging projects? And then I realized almost every project is challenging, or in some ways it's like it has its difficulties. But I can give like a general, like, I guess like quarter of our, like how we function is like we normally have like Q1 to Q4 photo shoots. I think that's a very standard sector of how to like differentiate between like different projects. So we will have these like huge photography productions that are either local here in New York or it would be like in California. And so what's challenging about that is to communicate with the production team, finding talents, wardrobe, stylists, like all of these different components while being remote. And then also coordinating like within our team, like who does what. And so sometimes we run into issues where it's like last minute purchases or like, oh my gosh, we need an extra day to do like thousands of things. And then that also then ends up being like working overtime and preparing for much longer than we need.
Yeah.
And that of course brings enormous amount of stress when like my team is only 6 people. So everybody does more than they need, and that of course like comes down to like wanting to create really good images. It's just like the coordination sometimes just never goes right, even though like they've been doing this for like 5+ years. Yeah. There's always some things that are gonna go wrong, and so the most challenging thing is just to like make sure everyone's on the same page. And like you said, like every day is different in media and things just change. So in order for everybody across all scales are on the same page is so hard in a company this big. So yeah, that's something that like pushes me to like, you know, make sure that the next time we do a better job.
Yeah. And I think anybody who has ever like coordinated a photo shoot or a short film or a film or like a podcast recording, right? They know how much goes into like putting all of it together, like how many elements need to come together for that one piece of media to be out there. And sure, now it is much more democratized, so you can use your iPhone or, you know, you can like play around with so many things and have your content. But professional content is still a challenging thing, right? Like doing top tier content is still challenging and expensive. So requires a lot of planning and like budgeting, and all of those skills are very important. So yeah, it's always fascinating to me that sometimes a small team is able to pull off something like so insane, right? Like everything everywhere all at once, like the things that they did with like visual effects, like I've not, like, that's what people are saying, right? Like a studio like Marvel could not pull off something like that with all that talent and all that money that like these bunch of like indie filmmakers were able to put together. So that's really inspiring when like I see those things.
Yeah, I was like reading about that and I was like, wow, there's like, they just followed YouTube tutorials and it, you know, won Best Picture. So it's like insane how you just don't see the behind the scenes, but it's like the value and the production and the output of it all was all worth it. And so, yeah, sometimes it's like you just don't know how it happened, but it did. And you just like have to move forward and you're like, if this is the best way, then we'll continue to do it that way. Yeah, but...
Okay. So given that you work with so many stakeholders, right? Like there are like, so let's say you mentioned photo shoots. So like there's photographers, costumes, logistics, like all of studio, all of that stuff. What's your secret sauce to like maintaining an effective communication? Especially since you mentioned it's across like different time zone, different location. How do you keep things straight in the sense that everybody's on the same page as much as possible?
Well, the one thing that after I like joined, I realized like everyone likes to do their things their own way, and then that of course means that like when you're doing something maybe like something very specific, like the other person doesn't know. So I've been trying to encourage more like transparency in terms of like communicating with the photographer, and then like the lists of other people that come after that. And so normally like our art directors are the ones that are very much in those creative conversations with the people who are going to be in the production. So from what I've seen and like been in those conversations, I see that, you know, of course we have to be very clear as to what direction we're taking, but without removing their creative ideas or their craft, because that's the one thing that you don't ever want to do, is to diminish what the other person's really good at. So there's a lot of transparency that needs to happen in order to, you know, make sure we're going in the correct direction for what the brand wants, but also what the photographer is trying to produce. So sometimes it can come off a little blunt, where it's like, hey, this is not exactly what I'm looking for, or this is not clear enough in these decks. Like, we need to push and make sure we're there. But I think, like, in that sense, you kind of know that this is just your work.
Yeah.
And everyone wants to do their best. So that's where I think we try to cultivate as, like, a team. But, of course, like, other people don't like that. They, you know, have their own opinions, and they're like, well, I think, you know, my work is great. And I'm like, okay. So we're, of course, more accommodating. And, like, we've worked with photographers before where they last minute are like, by the way, I can only shoot this photo shoot with these products. And we're like, you didn't tell us?
Yeah.
And the shoot is tomorrow. So in those situations, you're like, okay, I'm going to keep calm and realign with my team, and then, you know, start again.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, a lot of people come from a lot of different backgrounds in media, and they have like their own interpretation of how things should be done. And so sometimes I remember I was like shooting a film in Mumbai not couple of years ago, 2018, so it's been a while. And the DOP, he was just hell-bent on like shooting it like a particular scene in a particular location. And I'm like, it's just a very abrupt shift, right? Like, I've already thought of how the transition will gonna look. So it's just like, this does not make sense. Like, you know, the colors of the wall and the lighting and everything, it just looks bad. And it's like, no, but hey, I just graduated from the school. This is like the new wave cinema where like these are the colors and angles you play with. I'm like, sure, that's great. I'm glad that you know that. But maybe we'll do that on some other project. So it held up shoot for like a couple of hours because he was not willing to budge. He's like, you know what, this is what I was told, and I would be doing injustice to my craft if I, you know, budged to your demands. And I'm like, no need to get sentimental. It's just like, again, it's not personal, right? Like, we are trying to make the best product that we can. And it's better that we have a productive discussion that leads to a solution rather than getting into that ego battle of like, okay, whose word will be the final word? So we came up with like some hybrid approach where like he was partially happy and I was partially happy. And the actors were like, okay, can we cut already because I'm hungry? And I'm like, just 2 more minutes. We are working on it. So those things do happen. And sometimes you have to be blunt, as you said, where you have to put your foot down and say that, look, you know, I'm the director, I'm leading the project, and I envision it this way. So please just follow it. Like, you know, we'll experiment, we'll play around, we'll do more work together, but everything does not need to happen on one shoot or one project, right? You can space those out. So those things happen, and sometimes they get ugly, but that's just a necessary evil of working in media.
It's kind of hard to, like, or what I've noticed is it's really hard to find the sweet spot of like having full creative control and meeting like some brand's like requirement or need, because like as someone who's like also done personal work, like I can kind of understand like from the brand's perspective but also from the artist, is like you don't want to give yourself to this project or this commission and do whatever, you know, they say and the clients like need, but also the client and the brand doesn't want to fully, you know, like put pressure on the artist and remove their craft. And like, because it's a visual output, it's like you want to see the picture and be like, that's from this photographer or like this artist. So it's really hard to also communicate that. Like finding that middle ground is always like a little iffy, where people are just partially satisfied. And like that's just always, at least to me, like that's how it's gonna have to be for, I don't know, the rest of media history. But yeah, it's very, very harsh, and it's definitely based on like how you word things. Like if you say it like a little different, people are gonna take it wrong, and you might not get what you want, and you're like, oh, damn, I missed out on that opportunity.
True. Okay, so my next question to you, I guess, then is, how do you keep up with all the latest trends or like the buzz in the industry that's happening?
Well, I think Instagram is a great place. I also think it's like, personally, I keep up with, you know, all of my close friends, because since we kind of all came out from like art school, and like we're very much already in tune with wanting to know like what's going on in the industry. So even just like going to a physical museum, visiting gallery shows, my friends are also now having their own shows, and like connecting that way, I think is a great way to understand like what's new and upcoming. It's really funny because there's like a recent shoot that we just finished at Verizon, and every time before we shoot, you have to pitch like a photographer that you would like to work with to the higher ups. And so like my boss, actually, Hanifa Harris, I love her. She's a Pakistan, actually, photographer and artist, and she started this thing called the Photography Equity Initiative at Verizon, where we partner with people of color and of indigenous cultures to work with a big brand like us. And so in those conversations where we have to pitch a photographer, like we list out like all these up and coming like photographers that we know, and then we kind of see who the higher ups kind of like in terms of their style. And it's just funny how like that there's a gap between like who's in charge and in the hierarchy right now versus like us who are pitching these ideas. Is like their understanding of, oh, the most famous photographer is Annie Leibovitz and we want to use her, and we're like, actually that was like 10 years ago. Like she was great 10 years ago, but like now there's so much more new people and emerging artists that would love this opportunity. So it's just like interesting to see how like people like that are much older than us are like consuming media, and maybe like you can say stuck in a certain time period, versus like us. I think we're just so in tune with like everything that we consume that we're like, oh, I know this, and this, and you just like fire out these ideas. So yeah, it's interesting. I just started laughing. I was like, no, I don't think we're gonna use her. Yeah,
that's great that there is this initiative at a big company like Verizon, because usually it's easy to lose sight of these things, right? And you can get caught up into things like, okay, we need to hit certain numbers, we need to deliver on our projects. But I think diversity and inclusion has its own place in like every media format, right? And the more like the world is exposed to that, the more ideas they can absorb and understand that, okay, if a particular photographer or an editor has a certain point of view, where is that coming from? Like, what are the elements that they're combining that makes them stand out, right? So I think that's great that Verizon is doing that. And you know, when I was doing some research on you and I found like your photographs, right, like your pictures, it's just, I had this like very moody feel about it, in the sense that it has a certain sense of melancholy in it, right? Where like, it's not like that horror movie eerie feeling, but it's almost like, you know, things have slowed down for some reason, right? Like it has that feeling of gravitas and like, nobody's in a rush, nothing is like going crazy, which is very unusual to see that in New York, right? Like, because people try to capture the pace and the madness. So that was quite refreshing. And so I just felt that, okay, if you are able to capture that in New York, right, then that's, I think, like, a great way to look at things. And I got like a little bit of peek into like how you approach photography.
Thank you for the feedback, because like I don't really ever like know what my images speak, but I think it's like, of course, like my way of approaching my personal work is very, very different. A lot of my work has to do with like myself and my identity, just because I think, we both of us are came to New York and came to the U.S. for a career. Yeah. And so, and like my childhood is a little interesting based on like, because I moved from my home city, so it's just hard to keep up with the pace of like the life here. And then realizing I feel like I didn't really understand my past. So that kind of happened through photography. And like most of my like time in the past like 4 years at school was very much understanding like, how did I get here? And I'm also still like, how did I land in a job in an industry like this? It's just a lot is happening in a very short amount of time that I'm like, I really need to sit down and reflect on it. And so I think actually producing my own personal work is how I can have that time. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I started this podcast as a way to just see that am I the only crazy person or are there other crazies like me out in the world? And I found a lot of them in a good way. Yeah. So it's like, okay, I'm feeling out of place, but that's not just me. That's just like a lot of people who move here. And I mean, I come from Mumbai in India, which is kind of like New York of India. Yeah. So it's like with much more people though. So
it's so fast paced.
Yeah, I mean, like in our countries, we know like what people call overcrowding here is just like Sunday afternoon, right? Like in India and China. So it's that. And so, but still like the personality and like the way people are like in the city, it takes a while to like get adjusted to that. And I think for me, it was more about like discovering myself, as you said, like through your creative channel is that, okay, if me being like an Indian in New York, what does that mean? Like, what is my perspective of like looking at things, right? Yeah. And a lot of people appreciate that. And I'm thankful that I have those kind of people in my life. But there are also a lot of critics and you got to take good with bad. So I don't mind that also. But yeah, it's been like fascinating journey.
Yeah, I think like it's just like surrounding yourself with people who are kind of similar. Yeah. Like not necessarily the same, but like similar is interesting to see like, oh, how you are different in your own way. And then when you do your own like craft, I think that's where you see like, oh, we are all kind of the same in some way. It's just the way that we express it or the way that we live is just a little bit different. So yeah, and like being able to like connect with you like this, like, you know, we're able to understand like, oh, we're not from the same city or the same background, but like we still had the same goal moving here. Yeah. And it's just really nice to kind of like see that, oh, there's a community without, you know, like actually being physically close together. It's just like, okay, we have this universal understanding. Yeah. That's nice.
And a lot of my Chinese friends introduced me to the hot pot. And it's my favorite thing now in the world. Like I go there, like I go for hot pot. I mean, there's one hot pot at my place, but I go out like once in a month, once or twice in a month actually.
That's quite a lot.
Yeah, it's just like a fun meal, very wholesome meal. So I enjoy that. Great. So going back to your role at Verizon, how do you balance the speed and efficiency aspect of it, like given that most of your projects are on like tight deadlines?
Yeah. How do I deal with it? Well, most of the time, like I try to just get ahead. Like I think at some point you just like kind of know the gist of like the process, and then you try and see if you can just get ahead. So when the wave does come, you're a little bit more prepared. But like recently, like we've just had a lot of very rushed things that need to like be pushed out, and like thankfully like I didn't really need to overwork and like do overtime, but like I see that the neighboring teams are doing that, and so when things like that just like spring up and you have no idea that it's coming, like you just have to really get your head down and do it. There's just no other way. Like you just cannot procrastinate, because there's just like thousands of people being like, can you get this to me? Can you get this to me? So yeah, there's no real way of doing it, but I think last October, I did experience like my first time like having a panic attack in the office. And like it was just it's very interesting because like yeah, I've had panic attacks before, but also when it's at your job, I feel like it's a different type of stress because you just feel like you cannot do this right now, but like there's this like wall that's just pushing up against you, and like so that feeling was not good, but you just really have to like do it, and like it wasn't easy, but yeah, I don't know how other people do, and I would love to know, like I'm sure like I would love to know how the Wall Street guys like deal with stress. I mean, like with, you know, I understand they have other ways, but like
yeah.
like what's a healthy way of dealing with that is something that I'm very interested in doing.
Yeah, I used to work in investment banking, so I'll tell you after the recording is done.
Right.
Like how.
I would love to know.
Spoiler though, there are no healthy ways to deal with that.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think getting ahead helps, but like getting things done in advance helps. But I mean, that just opens up like a whole new door of like, okay, for something that you're doing on Monday morning, if you're starting Sunday evening, that's just like people then start expecting you like, okay, he was able to do this and that and that. Let me give him or her more stuff, right? Because pretty sure he can handle it. Because they think that you're working, like, it's different for every company, but like your superiors generally tend to start thinking that, okay, if you can manage all of that in 9 to 5, you can probably pick up a little bit more.
Yeah.
And that little bit more becomes like a lot more very quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's where like, you know, that honesty comes into play where like, okay, you know, I'm managing these projects by like extending myself, so I really don't have the bandwidth. A lot of people, especially like early in the careers, don't have that conversation and end up feeling burnt out and then exit like the whole corporate world entirely because they've had such a bad experience.
Yeah.
I just feel that it might seem scary, but have that conversation, and if your manager is not listening, then probably he or she is not a good manager.
Yeah.
So you will find your answer either way.
Yeah, I think like back like a few months ago, I think I was struggling to be like, I want to make sure I help everybody. But then like now knowing that like there were some layoffs at work, and like I'm hearing a lot of people from like close friends of mine are also like struggling. Yeah. I just see that like I cannot help everybody, you know? And now knowing that like, oh, my team is also like shrinking, I have to prioritize certain things. So I'm always like, I'd love to help you right now, but like I have 3 other things that need my attention, and unfortunately those are much more important for me to put my focus on. And like it's hard because like I don't know about everyone in the room, but like, and being an empath is extremely hard. Yeah. When you want to put everyone else first as well. So I think, again, it's like you have to be very honest and be like, love to help you, we'll get to you, but please understand that like we are doing our maximum and don't give me more.
Yep, that makes sense. Now, of course, and this is more a question to you as a photographer, how do you organize your workflow when there are multiple iterations of individual piece of media involved?
Like, so like outside of a job, like just
I mean, within or outside of your job, it's like, you know, how when you are editing a picture, then you like have multiple versions or iterations of it until like, there's one final file. I mean, there's not one final file. It's like final 1, final 2, final 3 updated.
Final.
Yeah. So it's so how do you keep things organized to like clearly see that, okay, this is final 1, final 2, or like V1, V2, however you go about it?
Well, like on a artist level, like if we're talking about like film photography specifically, the final is that first one. Like you just have to hope that it's like the best, and like most of the time like that's nice, but then if you realize like, oh, my photo didn't come out, or like it's not the way I wanted, then of course you would have to redo the whole thing. So that process is repetitive and kind of exhausting, but I think like in general my way of working is like, if I can visualize what my final is, I'm gonna try to do that. And if it doesn't look the way that I visualize, either I'm going to scrap the idea completely, or like ask for help and ask for advice on how to make sure that, we refine everything. So there's definitely been times where I'm like, this is exactly what I wanted, and I did it the first time. But there are multiple times where I just rethink about it. And that happens mostly like up here, and it never comes out. Because to me, I feel like if it comes out and it's my output, like I want that to already be close to the final, if that makes sense. But of course, everyone has a different way of working. So a lot of times I just like think about it and just brainstorm. So the pre-production part to me is more important than like the post-production.
The biggest lie in media is we'll fix it in the post. And you always run out of budget when you are trying to do that.
I think like it's also that part is like, I want to make sure that what I produce is already the final, so I don't have to lie or like conceal or fix the things that I didn't want to show. It should be already like very authentic from the beginning. And so that's why I think I also like film photography more, is like you cannot edit out like a whole person after, because it's literally imprinted on the film.
Now, how do you give effective feedback to people who are reaching out to you, like let's say within the company or outside the company, when somebody shares their piece of media with you? How do you make sure that you give an effective feedback to them?
Well, the thing is like, if we're talking in Verizon, like a lot of the people that I speak to who need like visual advice on like, did I pick this image right? Does it work with what I want to do? Most of these people sometimes aren't creatives themselves. Like a lot of project managers and like, like there are designers, but like a lot of project managers who do reach out, like they're not really understanding the fundamentals of like a photograph, or what the need is for like maybe choosing this picture over the other. So that's the hard part, because now you're speaking to them as if like they're a child. And like it's not a bad thing. It's just like it takes more time to explain without being like, oh, the exposure on this is way too high. And they're like, what do you mean? So I think how like myself and like my coworkers and like the art directors, we just tend to simplify the language. Like we do not use a lot of technical terms because of this issue, and it does waste more time when you have to explain it. So being able to offer visual advice is, again, being very straightforward. Like, this doesn't work because the person in this photo just looks like she's not having a good time. Or, oh, the colors in this don't work with the text. And it's just, these things just need to be, like, there's no negotiation that has happened. Like, when they question, like, why? You're like, I can't explain why. It's just an innate understanding that you just cannot, like, it's hard to explain. So we just try to, eliminate any type of technical terms. But then when we talk about it within ourselves, we're like, it's because blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So that's how we kind of do that.
Okay, yeah, that's great. I once shared a rough cut of my film with one of the industry's filmmakers, and he told me that the mise en scène is not set yet. I'm like,
Oh.
what? Why are you speaking French all of a sudden? And it's like, no, mise en scène means like the elements of the, like the composition of like the scene, and like how do you, you know, set up the lighting and the costume, foreground, background stuff. And I'm like, dude, I just like took a camera and recorded this stuff. I didn't think that, you know, there needs to be like precisely my point. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So in that sense, it raised my curiosity that, oh, okay, what is mise en scène, right? But then it also made sense because he was like, okay, you know, you just shot something randomly, but you need to redo that if you are trying to convey this message. So that's where like a lot of learning happened for me. But yeah, the way you do it, like it's like you have to sort of explain it in like the most layman terms for people to get the intuitive sense of what you're doing.
Yeah, because like, to be very honest, like when you're in those conversations, they're not looking to learn.
Yeah.
They're really just trying to get the job done.
Yeah.
And so, like, nor do I want to explain because I have other things to do too. So it's like at what points do you start learning is very different. And so I'm just like, I'll just give it to you and you can deal with it. And then, but the only thing that I think like other people need to learn, and like myself, is like, if we do it once, let's continue doing that. Like, take that input and like do it the next time. Because even though you're not a creative, or like you're speaking to people that are not creatives, I think like you at least need to understand like everyone else's process, because then now you're being selfish of just like being in your own world, and that's what happens most of the time. Like, you're so involved that you don't understand like what the other teams are doing. But I'm like, you need us and I need you in order to do things. So just basic understanding of each other's processes is what you need to learn.
Yeah. That's good advice. So I guess my final question to you then is, what would your advice be to somebody who's, you know, looking to be like a creative asset manager or a junior photographer in a corporate setting?
I'm not the best person to give advice. I think because I myself feel like I don't have a lot of like experience and
but
advice.
Let's say people on your level who are like just making the first transition into.
Well, the one thing is like, I think I mean, at least how I got into this is by surprise. I genuinely stumbled into it. I reached out to my boss, who is also a Parsons alumni, and she was the one who was able to give me this opportunity. And I was like, I don't even know if I'm equipped for this. But I think I said it before, it's just like to be very much open-minded to what a corporate world is. I feel like everyone has a certain expectation and understanding of what it could be like, but I feel that it varies and it's very different. So I don't think you should limit yourself in terms of that. Like, still adapt to what you have at hand and see what you can do and how you can utilize all the skills that you've had, whether it's on your personal life or, you know, your own experiences in other workplaces. I think that's just very important, because like a lot of processes in the corporate world have been in place for so long that you're not going to be the person to change it. You're just simply working within this loop. And we can make things more efficient, but there's still things that you have to follow. So I think that like not trying to be the hero and just being a good team player is something that I think that, you know, if someone is in a similar background to I am, would be really good to know. Also, just like when you're even at work, like don't take it too seriously. I think a lot of people do take it as like this is their end goal in life.
Yeah.
And I understand that like you can work your way up in like the industry and in the company, but at the end of the day, like this is just your day job, and it does not define you as a person, whether you're a creative person, a finance guy, like outside of work, like you have a lot more to offer. So do your best, but like don't get down on yourself if, you know, you made a mistake or you made someone unhappy. I think that like everyone has other things to look forward to. So yeah, I think that's what I would say.
That's a great advice. And yeah, I agree with everything that you said, that a person is a lot more than like, you know, how much money he or she makes or what is their title at work or how many people they manage, right? It's more about like who you are as an individual and how are you trying your best to make an impact, right? Whether it's like on your own or within an organization. But yeah, I think media is such a dynamic space that if you are able to sink your like teeth into it, like if you're able to get your foot through the door, try anything for like first 5 years, and it will set you up in like so many ways that for next 20 years you can do whatever you want, right? Like that first initial exposure is so important, that if you're willing to invest that time and effort, then you'll be set, because now you know how everything works, right? So you can be on the photography side, film side, editing side, marketing side, studio side, right? Like now you have streaming platforms, so there's so much work you can do there. So yeah, I just feel that media is at like a very interesting point in its history, and if people are willing to invest their time and energy, then they will reap all the benefits of their effort. So yeah, great advice. Cool. Okay, so we have had a lot of heavy discussion, right? So I think it's time to loosen up a little bit. I wrote some rapid fire questions, so you need to be quick and you need to be fiery. Okay. Great. Okay, so first question, your favorite camera?
I don't know the exact model, but I currently have a Leica camera, which my parents passed down to me. It's the camera that they took baby images of me in. Okay. So I don't know the model, but if I know, I'll let you know.
Yeah, we'll put it in the edit.
Yeah.
Your favorite lens?
Don't have one. I genuinely don't have one. They're all kind of the same to me, because we do the same thing. So,
Zoom lens, cine lens, nothing? No?
Yeah, I'm going to pass on that one.
Okay. Favorite pizza topping?
I don't know if it's like controversial, but peppers, kind of fire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine is pineapple, so.
Oh, okay.
I'm getting cancelled tomorrow, I know. Your favorite holiday destination?
Oh, Japan.
Mine is Japan as well.
Yeah.
I was there in 2018, and I've been meaning to go back ever since.
I just went this past winter.
Oh.
It never gets boring.
It never gets boring. I was there for 2 weeks. I did like Tokyo, Kyoto, Hiroshima, and then like Chiba and like bunch of other places.
Wow.
And I'm still not satisfied. There's like so many other things I want to explore.
Yeah.
Okay, cats or dogs?
Cats.
Dogs. Star Wars or Star Trek?
I don't like either. But
she's definitely getting cancelled.
I'll pick Star Wars.
I pick Star Trek just because fewer movies.
True. The franchise is smaller.
That's not true.
I think we need a separate episode on that. Like, I think we can have you join us.
Yes.
Your all-time favorite TV show or movie?
All-time favorite TV show is New Girl. I love New Girl. And then, that's it.
You have to just say one. Okay. My favorite show, I would say, is Breaking Bad. So
that's a good classic one.
Yep. Hot pot or pasta?
That's so hard. I like both. Let's go with hot pot. Go with my roots.
Yeah. I mean, they both involve noodles to a certain extent, but mine is hot pot as well.
There's more diversity within like what you can eat, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah.
Yep. True. Cool. Texting or talking?
Talking. Texting gets iffy sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, people misinterpret a lot of
Exactly.
things. So, yeah, prefer talking as well. New York or LA?
I've never been to LA.
So New York by default then?
Yeah, New York by default. I do love SF. If that's a close second, I don't.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah, but
New York or SF, I guess.
I don't know. I'm gonna say New York, so I don't get people mad.
Yeah. Mine is New York as well. I've lived in so many other cities, but I always come back to New York. So, okay. This is a choice question. So, would you go back in time 2 years or 10 years in the future?
10 years in the future. I don't know if I want to go back 2 years.
But you can go back knowing everything you know in the present moment.
No. I'd be too, like, anxious. Like, because you know already, I'm like, no. Yeah, I want to be, like, surprised. Like, no, I don't want to be in control. And I just want to know what it's like in the next 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would pick future as well. So, okay. Final question. Say good day, mate, in Australian accent.
Okay. Good day, mate. Is that
That's
okay?
not bad.
I don't know.
It's pretty close.
I don't know how to do it.
Let me give it a
Not
shot.
Yeah.
Good day, mate. How's it going, eh?
Okay, that's better than
We'll
mine.
go for brekkie. Would you like some beer?
What was it?
Some mid-strength beer and now
Yeah.
some Vegemite.
Was it
Sorry, my Australian
Barbie
friends.
on the grill or something like that? I don't know.
Barbie on the grill?
Or some
Oh,
shrimp
yeah,
on
yeah.
the Barbie. It's a Barbie on the grill.
Yeah, it's like I once had Vegemite here in New York, and it was like I put so much Vegemite that I started hating it. It's good on a toast,
really?
but I
Okay.
put so much of it that it's just like automatically repulsive to me now.
Yeah, I don't want to try it. No, thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Afflatus. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Melissa Mui and learned valuable lessons from her career journey. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to stay up to date on future episodes. And if you found this content helpful, please give us a thumbs up and share it with your friends and colleagues. Remember, success is not just about what you achieve, but how you achieve it. So keep pushing forward, stay motivated, and let the Afflatus be your guide on your journey towards success. Thank you.